Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hi, it's nice to meet you, Rachel.
Nice to meet you. I always think it's fascinating when an author is kind of part of the process of their work being adapted into live action. For you, what was the overall kind of feeling of getting to see Uglies come to life in this way and like your own involvement with everything?
Um, I mean, I got to go on set a couple times,
Mhm.
once for a week when we were out of the smoke, and another time for a little bit less than that when they were in the studio in Atlanta. And it was just amazing to walk around and watch this and see the set of the smoke. I mean, they'd basically built a little town, and the buildings were disguised in the landscape. They sort of like they have grass on their roof and they're, and sod, which insulates them and also makes them, I was just amazed at at how the production company had thought of all this, the production department had thought of all these things that I had never thought of as camouflage and you know conserving heat. And I was and it was just amazing to say, I just made this stuff up. Like, who built it? Like, why would you go build all this stuff? It's fake, right?
When it's so funny because I've never seen a like comment section on a YouTube video look like the Uglies trailer did, where everyone's like, I never thought I was gonna see an adaptation of this. How does that make you feel as an author knowing that like all these people read this book and are like, I never thought I was gonna see this become a live action thing, and now people getting excited that it's coming out?
So, I've spent like a lot of the last 20 years traveling to bookstores and talking to
Mhm.
people, and they all have asked this question. Like every time I go into a bookstore, someone will ask, when's there going to be an Uglies movie? Why hasn't there been an Uglies movie? And I always say, I had this joke that I would tell, which is that, whenever it gets to the highest person in Hollywood who has to sign the $100 million check, they say, wait a minute, you want to make a movie about ugly people? And and it's just like the ethos of the book and the ethos of Hollywood don't match. And so what I would end that joke with is to say, so how it's going to work is that one of you has to grow up and become a movie producer or the head of a studio, and you're going to make this book into a movie. And in a weird way, that's kind of what happened. Like, Joey King read this book when she was 12 and, had a fever in bed, and it stuck with her. So when she, after Kissing Booth and her great successes started to roll, people started asking her, well, what movie do you want to make? And, this was still in her mind. So it's great that it came into being because a fan wanted to make it, not because some producer whose kids liked it or somebody who just thought it was a way to make money, but somebody who grew up with it and understood it in the way that's meant to be understood, which is by somebody who's 12 years old.
Yeah, when it's funny because I said this to McDream and I talked to him. I was like, the Barbie quote came to mind where Barbie is like crying and calls herself ugly, and then the voiceover is like, "Don't cast Margot Robbie if you want to make this point." It felt like that. I was like, Joey King is so pretty. And this whole movie, they're like, when you're pretty one day, when you're pretty. And I was like, I know that's the point, but it is very funny because I was like, she's so pretty. Like, I feel like everyone just like was not paying attention to how pretty she is. When you have someone like Joey playing this part and it really drives home for like the audience like, hey, yeah, that's the point, is that people look over other people's beauty to hold them to some other higher standard. Does that make you excited to know like it is going to be that obvious to a new audience kind of coming into the story?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that any kind of discourse about this stuff is good. One of my things that I love about writing for teenagers is that you don't really have to resolve the issues on the page, because teenagers, when they read a book, they will go find other people who've read that book. They will make their friends read that book.
Mhm.
They will form a cafeteria table where everyone's read that book, and they will do the talking, and they will figure out, the issues that you've raised, and they'll, they will make it part of their lives to talk about your book. And I think that, you know, by creating this movie and by putting real movie stars in it who are beautiful, you create a whole level of discourse about what beauty is and like how we see it or don't see it when it's right in front of us, and how, and or whether the movie would have been made if they weren't beautiful people. I mean, I think all of those questions are great to ask and are interesting to talk about. And the movie doesn't have to make those decisions for anybody. They can make them for themselves.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I interviewed McGee, I had my glasses on, and I said like when I was a teenager, I wouldn't wear my glasses ever, and now I'll wear them in interviews if I'm like running around and
Right.
I was like I need to look somewhat cool. I'll wear my glasses, and I think it's very interesting because every once in a while I get the comments that's like, "Does she not know she's on camera?" And I'm like, I'm just wearing glasses. Like that's the, but when you look at it through a teenager's perspective, I would have found a way to never wear my glasses again because someone commented on them. When you are writing these stories for teenagers, has you heard stories about how like it's helped people kind of accept certain parts about themselves that they might not have in the past?
I got an email just a couple years after the book came out, which was a young woman who had wanted to get a nose job her entire life. And when she planned to get one when she turned 18. And then she read the book when she was like 17 and three quarters and rethought about it and said, maybe I don't need a nose job. And she had decided not to get one. And on top of that, to write me, the author of the book, to thank me for saving her nose. And I was like, that's great. If I can save just one nose, it's all been worth it. And
Just
now,
one
and
thing.
she was saying, like, I love my nose. It's like it's larger than the
Mhm.
approved nose. It's a little more crooked. But now I think it's super awesome and makes my face more distinctive and more interesting.
Yeah, which is I think such a it makes you think about all these different things when you're watching this movie or reading the books. When you are going into something like this, which is, it might be someone's first introduction, and then there's all these other stories that they can kind of go and look for in this universe. What are you the most excited about for an audience getting to see this live action take on your work?
Um, well, I think it's interesting because in the book, a lot of the messaging, a lot of the themes are pretty much right on the page. I mean, they're right in the title.
Mhm.
And in a movie, you can really tell, like, it's Big G. It's like a big adventure. There's lots of chase scenes, there's lots of explosions, and the way that New Pretty Town looks, like that future is lurid and amazing. It looks like bubblegum being injected into your eyes. And so the nutritional content is sort of sneaking its way around the back door. And it's about raising the issues and it's about the conversations after the movie. And I think it's a different kind of storytelling. It's a different kind of, way of getting into an audience's head, which I love, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and for my last question, I have to ask because I did point this out to Victor. I was like, you made them look like these AI creations, and he was like, well, yeah, because I was doing it like based on filters and stuff. But it made me look at everyone who was like the normal, like they hadn't gotten pretty yet, and I'm like, they look fine. Like I don't know what everyone's talking about. Was that kind of your image? Like, what were your ideas when you were writing what the pretties would look like, and how does that compare to what the pretties ended up looking like in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, well, as a science fiction writer, like I put things in the future, so I sometimes think about when I was writing the book, I was thinking, what would we look like to people from the past?
Mhm.
And I think we would look pretty weird to people from 200 years ago because when you even look at pictures of like even when I look at pictures of my dad, like when he was 30 and when I was 30, completely different. Like the
Mhm.
amount of aging that happened and the kinds of products we use. I think, we look weirdly younger. We look weirdly softer than people back then did. And so I think that the pretties would look as strange to us as our teeth being kind of weird, perfect and weirdly white.
Mhm.
Like even, even I'm sure if you are a big movie star and you go to a small town, everyone just immediately knows you look strange. You look weird. Your teeth are too white. Your skin is too clear. Like, why do you look that way? So all of these things are relative and all these things are just what you're used to. What's amazing now is that we're used to all this strange stuff like yassification filters and
Mhm.
and Photoshop. And so I think what the movie brings up is just that um, the way our brains have gotten used to the human face is changing all the time.
Yeah. I can't wait for everyone to get to see it. Thank you so much for talking with me today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to meet you.
Nice meeting you. Have a great one.
You too.